As consumers, we make millions of decisions every day. Millions, like where am I going to shop? What am I going to buy? Some people choose to explicitly connect their values with their shopping list as a way to try and influence companies and advocate for change. But does consumer activism actually work? This is something Lindsey Stanberry wrote about for The Purse, the site she founded dedicated to women in personal finance. And I wanted to talk to her more about this. She joins us from Brooklyn, New York. Hello there.
Hi, Bruce. How are you doing today?
I am good. There are, a million shopping decisions, but a
Yeah.
million stories in which consumers could react. They have, you know, emotion, they have anger, they have opinions, and many times they will try and connect those to their buying behavior and the buying behavior around them. Tell us a bit about what consumer activism looks like today in this decade versus maybe where it was a generation ago.
Yeah, I think there are so many places to shop, and yet it often feels like consumer choices are narrowing. It's easy to log on to Amazon or Target or one of those big box stores and do all your shopping in one place. But I think increasingly consumers are having second thoughts about shopping at some of these big box stores and trying to retreat and shop more locally and small, which is great, but also can have some challenges.
The question that you endeavor to answer, which is a difficult question, is the efficacy of
Right.
these things. What did you find? There is not one single empirical study that says, oh, yeah, they work if these four conditions are met.
Yeah.
It's more nuanced than that. But how would you bring that together and answer the question of, are these effective?
Well, you speak to most executives and economists, and they will tell you they don't work. If you look at the history of boycotts, they don't work. But I would argue that that's not a reason not to be a conscious consumer, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's your money, and thinking about where it goes is not a bad thing and will make you feel really good about your spending. So maybe you're not going to influence a corporation and make a real change, but in your personal life, you'll be a better, happier person.
Yeah, I think so. Chicken fillet is never going to get my business, no matter
Yeah,
how much they try and reframe their
yeah.
historic homophobia. But I feel better knowing that I've never tasted that chicken. So that and $7 will get you a coffee at Starbucks, which maybe we shouldn't even be going to Starbucks. I don't know. I haven't checked the list. Uh,
The list is long.
the list is pretty long. Can you think of examples in which this actually did work pretty well? I was doing some work on chicken fillet in prep for our conversation, and they've had a hard time launching in the UK because of boycotts on the launch. Are there some gold standards in which it was effective?
So I'm not sure that you're going to find great examples of boycotts where it did work. But I think that you'll see that there is places where people push back against rollouts. I think a good example of that is Costco in the US. Recently, they've become under fire because of their DEI practices, but shareholders actually came forward and said, no, what you're doing is working, keep doing it, which is, I think, great to see. So while you might not necessarily see consumers pushing back, I think there you'll see shareholders and people in those positions of power having greater authority in these situations. I think the same thing happened at Apple too.
You raised Amazon, which is a really problematic one
Yeah.
because for someone to boycott Amazon, it is not the same as, but close to someone saying they're going to boycott water. Like it's just
It's true.
universal.
It's
How do you, what advice do you have for people trying to think that through for themselves?
Yeah, I think that this is another one where it just comes down to your like day-to-day habits and thinking about where you're shopping. Yes, it's really hard to disconnect from Amazon Web Services. Like you can't use most government websites in the US. I think the New York Times may be Amazon Web Services. There's some great reporting out there about how widespread Amazon is. But things like everyday purchases from Amazon honestly will also be good for your wallet if you stop them. I think that we get into a real habit of thinking we need something right now, this minute, but you don't. Take a minute. And that's another place where just thinking about how you're spending will make you feel better in the long run.
We're journalists. Certainly, companies spend a tremendous amount of time on pitching journalists, working PR, doing all those sorts of things. And if the activism doesn't hit them in terms of sales, is there any data that says it hits their brand equity numbers or other maybe less tangible things that they are trying to influence at a higher level?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Bruce. I think that a lot of it has to do with national sentiment. And we're in a really funny place in the United States right now where the national sentiment doesn't seem to be leaning toward things that are very important to me, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we see companies moving away from that. Whereas, 5 years ago, following the murder of George Floyd, it was a very different environment where the national sentiment was leaning towards, more diversity and inclusion in companies. So unfortunately, it feels like it has to do with sort of like what the tone and the vibe of the country is. And since we're in a very strange time right now, companies are really trying to like be extra careful. And I think that this is where it's very important for consumers to speak up, even if it doesn't make them feel like they're moving a needle. I think in the long run, you want to be on the right side of history.
So there is the values orientation. I can see that being a real driver for lots of people. The hurdle, convenience, because oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to leave my house and go to a hardware store and pick something up instead of it having it be delivered.
They may not have the exact right thing you want.
They may not, and then I wasted my whole trip. But there's also a cost component. So one of the things that has made Amazon in particular, akin to meth, is it's less expensive in so many different categories. If we think just about the math, what wisdom would you have for consumers to say, okay, you're looking at your monthly budget and it may cost more for you. It's like the price to buy organic, right? It's more expensive. It's like 35% more expensive. Is that important to you? How would you address that?
That comes up a lot. And I think it's a really interesting point. I actually stopped using Amazon during the pandemic for many of these reasons, but also because I felt it really hard to track their prices and feel like I was getting a good deal. So I almost wonder sometimes when this argument is made if it actually is the cheapest or if it's just the most convenient and people have sort of lulled themselves into a sense of it being affordable.
Right.
So I would first push back on that and say, like, is it really? Have you done the research?
Right.
And two, look, we're all just trying to get by in a lot of ways, right? Like we're all just trying to be humans in the world. And I think that with so many things, we put a lot of guilt and pressure on ourselves and nobody's perfect. Like I end up shopping on Amazon sometimes. My well-meaning family members give us gift cards and they have to be spent, right? So I think that that's a big thing to consider.
Well, I love that you brought that up because I bring it up when people talk about buying in bulk at Costco all the time. And what they will say, like it is the law of gravity, is that it's always cheaper. And what I will say, as a former brand manager from Procter & Gamble, no, it's not. And first of all, it's not cheaper. But second of all, you're consuming more because you bought 24 rolls of paper towels. So you think, I had a paper towel to last me to the end of time. I'm using 5 sheets.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What if you could say one final thought on this idea of consumer activism, whether it's effective or not, what would you say?
I think that it's really important for people to look internally and consider what's important to them and be less worried about everyone else, with the understanding that as an individual, it is not entirely a responsibility to change the world. We put a lot of responsibility on our shoulders and it's not going to work. So think about your own spending, think about where you want your dollars to go and that you feel good about. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, no judgment. So
no judgment.
You're gonna buy your diapers on Amazon because that's what you're gonna do. You should just do that.
You should do it and it's okay.
Yeah, very helpful, very insightful. Lindsey, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Bruce.
Lindsey Stanberry, she's with The Purse. She joined us from Brooklyn, New York today to talk about consumer activism and, the efficacy, the morality, and what really matters to you.